The goal is to target the worst polluters in the United States, the individuals who threaten public health and the environment the most. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, sets tough standards and takes aggressive action to enforce those standards. Enforcement can mean civil actions and criminal actions taken against employees who knowingly violate state and federal regulations. In fact, in one recent year, the EPA referred 256 criminal enforcement actions to the U.S. Department of Justice and began 562 new criminal investigations. The result of this hard-hitting attempt to stop polluters is sobering. Monetary penalties imposed for these convictions add up to tens of millions of dollars. Since 1990, both company owners and plant managers have received over 422 years in prison time for committing environmental crimes. The truth is, compliance with environmental laws like the Clean Water and Clean Air Act is not optional. Each of us in our homes and on the job are responsible for knowing and following these laws. If you are responsible for the storage or monitoring and discharge of potentially hazardous materials or industrial pollutants in your workplace, you are under even greater scrutiny. You must comply with state and federal environmental standards, which means you must know and stay within the acceptable limits established. If you don't, eventually you may pay the price. Terry Reddick is.
Controlling a treatment plant is a dicey proposition at best.
After 20 years as a sewage treatment plant operator, 46-year-old Terry Reddick had a lot to say about what he did and why he did it.
What I did was wrong, and I fully admit that. And I'm sorry I did. And in retrospect, I shouldn't have done it, but I did. I think I know why I did it. And I know that there are other people in my position that are probably doing the same thing. I wouldn't consider myself anti-environment, very much for the environment, but the practical side is there. You have to make a living, you have to supply your basic necessities, so you go where they pay you the most money.
Terry, who from college began working in a city sanitation lab, said subtle pressure was there from the beginning to ensure that the results reported stayed within acceptable legal limits set forth by the Clean Water Act. Reddick worked his way up to plant operator in the employment of a meat packing plant, meeting state licensing requirements and getting familiar with operating permits along the way. He said he was told by his employer that it was a top priority to pass inspections. Eventually, Terry chose what he considered the path of least resistance.
No, I manipulated just about anything you could manipulate to make sure the numbers showed what needed to be reported. You can manipulate flow. You manipulate when you pull the samples. There's any number of things you can do to make the numbers say what you want them to say. There's kind of an ego side of it. You get caught up in the power. It's a power ego. Also, I'm a recovering workaholic. You do whatever it takes, and I was working 7 days a week, 12 to 18 hours a day. I went a year without a day off.
In 1995, the EPA, the Department of Justice, and the FBI began investigating Terry Reddick and his actions.
The FBI did an extensive investigation of me. They talked to everybody in the world about me. So I knew it was coming. It's just a matter of when the shoe would fall.
Eventually, Reddick was indicted on criminal charges including knowingly falsifying documents and destroying pollution records. In January of 1997, Terry Reddick was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison for 23 violations of the National Clean Water Act. His employer denied any knowledge of his actions.
There's a lot of things that go through your mind when you found you've come to the end of that path that you've chosen, and there's a sheer drop-off. You're down to the abyss, as it were. You do a lot of soul searching. You think, oh, what if I'd only done this? The hardest part the effect on my family. My career of about 20 years is down the tubes. Now I have to start all over again. I'm 46 years old. I'm going to prison. I'm a felon, convicted felon, with all the baggage that will entail. My employability is greatly reduced. My chance of living in a lifestyle that I've grown accustomed is greatly reduced.
Since his conviction, Terry Reddick has had time to reflect on the pressures he felt, the path he chose, and the lessons he learned.
I guess that's one of the hardest things for me. I worked my entire life since I was 16, and now I'm a burden to society. They give you your food, they give you your clothes. I mean, they give you you're actually a welfare case, and that really affects me as much as the separation from the family and things like that. So you're just broken down. You lose your self-respect. So you rationalize things. It's like speeding. You're violating the law, but you rationalize, well, I need to get from point A to point B. Well, is it worth risking your life and the lives of the people around you to do that? If you really thought about that, you may slow down and do the speed limit, because those laws were written for a purpose. The same goes for environmental laws. They're written for a purpose. And you really don't think about that. You rationalize it. Well, I'll do whatever it takes, and I'll get my paycheck, and I'll go on. You don't even think about getting caught or the ramifications of it.
It's not always easy to comply with state and federal environmental laws, but it is necessary. Necessary if you want to avoid thousands of dollars in fines and months or years in prison. Make sure you understand the law and act responsibly. Be familiar with the environmental laws regulated by the EPA, like the Clean Water and Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, or the Toxic Substances Control Act. Know which of these and other state and federal laws apply to your workplace and your job. Make sure you follow the requirements of state licenses and permits. Know what you could be held accountable for, either in a civil or criminal action. Terry Reddick wouldn't recommend the path he took, a path of least resistance.
Don't buy into it. It seems like it's easy at the time. People are put under a lot of pressure, both by their families and by their economic situation. There's a lot of pressures to do what they probably know is not the right thing to do. And then if you start rationalizing something, you can rationalize anything, when if you really look at what they're doing, it's not right. It's illegal, and you're liable for your actions. And if you're caught, you'll pay the penalty.